Welcome and thank you for tuning into A Sound Constitution on CHLY 101.7 FM with Lindsay, Manisha, Neelafar, Sanaz, and Kristen. We are fourth-year nursing students at Vancouver Island University in Nanaimo.
We are working to demystify health issues affecting our community, bringing you evidence-based information about our healthcare. This information is for educational purposes only and does not replace the advice of your primary healthcare provider.
We'd like to start off our show by acknowledging and thanking the Coast Salish people, whose unceded territory we have the opportunity to live, learn, and share educational experiences on.
Hello, CHLY listeners. I'm Lindsay, one of your hosts for today's show. Today we're going to be talking about vaping and young people. I guess you could say we are clearing the air on vaping. Manisha is going to be bringing us the Your Opinion Matters segment up next.
So vaping refers to using e-cigarettes to inhale many substances including nicotine, THC, or CBD oils. I asked you, what are your thoughts on vaping?
Hey you!
Who, me?
Yeah, you! We want to hear what you have to say, because...
Your opinion matters!
Hi, what's your opinion about vaping and vaping-related illnesses?
Well, I believe that vaping is a better alternative to smoking. However, I also believe you should know what is in the product you are vaping, meaning not to buy from the black market. I think those who are legally not old enough to buy regulated vaping products or who can't provide personal identification buy from the black market and get sick. And that's what I think.
I think that it can be just another method for people to use an unhealthy substance. And I think that there are probably not enough studies on it to, so that we really know what the long-term effects are.
I just think it's strange how quickly there's been a crackdown on vaping when there are many other things that have been going on. It's like, why crack down on vaping and flavors of that sort of stuff when you've got all sorts of flavored vodkas and flavored whiskeys in the liquor store, and there are other issues that the governments could be cracking down on. Like, we've got all this environmental stuff going on, and we've got homelessness as an issue, we've got housing costs, the cost of living. Why vaping of all things?
Yeah, to me, it's the vaping is no different than smoking. I mean, both of them are addictive. They both have nicotine in it. And one of the other major issues is with vaping, it gives you adrenaline rush and also increases the heart rate. It's even worse than cigarette, And also there's one of the biggest problem in society right now is for smoking, there's a minimum age set up by the Health Canada, and it's 18 years old. But for vaping, any teenager, they can easily access it online. They can easily get it, purchase it. So it's one of the major concerns in this society. It's spreading out. So vaping is not a better option than cigarettes.
So what I think about vaping is that it's flavored and it smells really good and it tastes really good. And the problem with that is it becomes more attractive to younger adults and children. And ultimately, we don't want them starting that habit, because as much as it's better than smoking, it's still better to not do anything.
Wow, that was some interesting perspectives from our community. What is the current statistics on health issues on vaping, Manisha?
Well, as of October 1st, 2019, 1,080 lung injury cases associated with e-cigarette or vaping products have been reported to CDC from 48 states and 1 U.S. territory. 18 deaths have been confirmed in 15 states. Approximately 80% patients are under 35 years old.
Okay, so that was some statistics from the CDC. Could you tell us what's happening here in Canada?
Yes, I can. So the most recent survey was done in 2017, and it showed that 15% of Canadians have tried vaping products. Youth, which is 15 to 19 years old, and young adults, that is 20 to 24 years old, have the highest rates of trying vaping. 32% of current or former cigarette smokers who have ever used vaping products reported using it as a quit smoking aid or to quit smoking. These are all stats from Health Canada. Here's another survey from Health Canada, which is done between grades 7 to 12 Canadian students, and it talks about their use of vaping products. The most recent survey was done in 2016 to 2017, and it showed that 23% of students in grades 7 to 12 have tried vaping. 53% of all students thought it would be fairly easy or very easy to get a vaping product such as e-cigarettes if they wanted one. For more information, visit healthlinkbc.ca, cdc.gov, and canada.ca/en/health-canada. Suchitra Krishnan Sareen, a behavioral scientist, did a TED Talk titled What You Should Know About Vaping and E-Cigarettes. She does a great job explaining the issues surrounding teens and young adults vaping.
It gets easier, right? These are the words I often hear from young parents who are new to the game of worrying about their children. I tell them that it doesn't. It gets different, but there's always something to worry about as parents. I remember how I would lie half awake at night listening to my son breathe when he was young and had asthma, and then when he was a teen until I heard the front door chime open and I knew that he was home safe. Worrying about our kids comes with the territory. Now, many of these worries are about basic issues, like what they eat, where they are, who they are with. But we also need to keep an eye on new behaviors and fads. The latest craze is something that may not yet be on everyone's radar as a serious health concern, and that is the newfound popularity of vaping, or inhaling sweet aerosols produced by vaporizing e-liquids in e-cigarettes. E-cigarettes, or vapes, as they are commonly called, are flying off the shelves like candy. This year, the e-cigarette market is expected to drive $26 billion in sales worldwide. Over the next 6 years, that volume is expected to double. We have a lot of serious concerns about the health impact of vaping, and unfortunately, not nearly enough answers. This becomes even more concerning when you think of who uses e-cigarettes. E-cigarette use, at least in the US, has grown rapidly among youth and young adults. Our kids, our most vulnerable population. There was a 900% growth in the use of e-cigarettes by youth between 2012 and 2015. The most recent estimates suggest that approximately 3.6 million high school and middle school students have used e-cigarettes in the US. Now, e-cigarettes were originally created to offer smokers a cleaner form of nicotine to help with their cigarette addiction. In the US, these devices come under the FDA's jurisdiction as a tobacco product. But the science on these devices has not been able to keep up with the rapid market growth. So regulations on the components of these devices and e-liquids are lagging. Current regulations do restrict sales of these devices to anyone under the age of 18, but these do not seem to have had much of an impact on the explosion in the use of these devices by teens. You know, the first time I heard and saw of an e-cigarette, I knew right away that teens would love it. These devices are technology on a stick, a perfect fit for the smartphone generation. Small, rechargeable, easy to use, easy to modify, nice smelling. Some even sync with your smartphone to let you know how much you have vaped. Even I was very drawn to these very clever devices. And since I had spent a long time researching teen and adult addictions, I immediately realized that these devices fit perfectly into the teen psyche. Teens are impulsive, and they love to try new things. They're also craving independence, and they love to make things their own. E-cigarettes meet these needs perfectly by allowing them the chance to both innovate and personalize their vape experience. They can choose from over 15,000 different e-liquid flavors and multiple nicotine concentrations. They can even create their own nicotine flavor combination. They can change how much vapor is produced from these devices by modifying the puff volume and the constituents and the power and temperature of the devices. They can even use these devices for cloud chasing. Cloud chasing, also called vape tricks or smoke tricks, involves producing large vape clouds with quirky shapes and names like rings, dragons, ghosts. Cloud chasers can even participate in cloud competitions and win prizes for creating the most innovative shaped clouds. Teens can also change the strength and throat hit from the vapor by either vaporizing the e-liquid at higher temperatures or dripping the e-liquid directly onto a heated coil. They can even use these devices for marijuana vaping. And since the devices use lower temperatures and do not combust or burn the marijuana, they can do this very discreetly without the distinctive smell of burnt marijuana. So they can really make these vape experiences their own, which may explain the astounding rise in the use of these devices by youth. Now, e-cigarettes are technically a very simple device. There is a receptacle for the e-liquid, which can be a tank, a pod, or a plug. There is a battery, which charges the coil, which then vaporizes the e-liquid. And then there is a mouthpiece where the user can actually draw from the e-cigarette. In 2017, there were 466 e-cigarette devices in the marketplace. These range from cigarette-like devices, which are also called cigalikes, to tank systems, which are also called pens. And then there are modified devices, which are also called mods. Now, mods look nothing like a cigarette, and they come in various shapes and sizes with different kinds of attachments and user adjustments. They are very popular for cloud chasing. The most recent entrants into the marketplace are the pod devices, which contain the e-liquid in a pod. These are very popular, by the way, among teens. And an example of this is the Juul, which not only looks like a USB device, but can also be plugged into a USB outlet to charge. Many teens do not even think that these are e-cigarettes, which has led to the use of terms like juuling instead of vaping. Many of these devices are so discreet and produce so little vapor that teens are using them in classrooms and hiding them in objects like Sharpie pens, their clothes, their books. Now, many teens think that these devices produce water vapor, and therefore they are safe to use. But this could not be further from the truth. What is produced is not even a vapor, it's an aerosol. And let me tell you, the difference is quite pronounced. Aerosols contain many finely suspended particles of liquids and gases that are created from whatever is in the e-liquid. So, an aerosol could contain propylene glycol and glycerine, which are solvents in the e-liquid. Now, these solvents are known to be safe for edible use, so for use in products that you eat, but we know very little about their safety following long-term inhalational exposure. The e-liquids can also contain alcohol, sometimes in high levels, and inhaling alcohol is known to have toxic effects on the brain. I told you earlier that the e-liquids contain over 15,000 different flavors. Here are some examples. Some with very catchy but familiar names like Skittles and Fruit Loops, and others with more exotic names like Dragon's Milk and Tiger's Blood and Unicorn Puke. The e-liquid or the aerosol can also contain metallic particles like chromium, cadmium, and lead. Now, these are generated from the heating coil in the devices and are also known to have many toxic effects on vital organs. So no, let me make this very clear. What is produced is definitely not water vapor. Exposure of the teen brain to nicotine through e-cigarettes is also very concerning. The teen brain is very sensitive to even low levels of nicotine and gets very easily addicted. In fact, we have known for a long time that 90% of smokers start smoking cigarettes prior to the age of 18. Those who start early are more addicted and have a harder time quitting smoking. In other words, and to quote a past FDA commissioner, nicotine addiction is a pediatric disease. Now, e-cigarettes can expose teens to a lot of nicotine. Many of these devices contain the amount of nicotine that is in a full pack of cigarettes. The more recent pod devices contain a nicotine salt, which has a smoother taste and is much easier to use, and can produce rapid increases in brain nicotine levels. Teens who use e-cigarettes regularly report symptoms of craving, feeling anxious when they don't have their e-cigarettes. All these are hallmarks of a behavioral addiction. Now, e-cigarettes not only are not only addictive, but they also affect many other organs in the body. So nicotine, which is in e-cigarettes, for example, binds to a receptor called the nicotinic acetylcholine receptor, which plays a key role in the functioning of almost all organ systems in the human body. And chronic exposure to nicotine changes the functioning of these systems. So as an example, chronic exposure to nicotine decreases the flexibility of the blood vessels and changes how the heart responds to acute challenges like stress. The teen brain is not only sensitive to the addictive effects of nicotine, but also to its toxic effects. In adolescent animals, nicotine is a very well-established neurotoxin, and it decreases learning, memory, and attention processes and increases hyperactivity symptoms. Teens who use tobacco products are more likely to use marijuana and alcohol and also develop depression and anxiety as a teen or as an adult. So nicotine addiction through e-cigarettes could be leading them down the path of other addictions and other mental health problems. Now, in adolescent animals, nicotine also produces epigenetic changes or heritable changes in gene expression. For example, in the genes involved in asthma. So teens who use nicotine may not only be harming themselves, but they could be harming their future generations. You know, the very existence of e-cigarettes could have led to an entire generation of nicotine-addicted youth. Easy access to these devices could have led to more experimentation with marijuana and many other vaporizable substances by youth. While there is no doubt that providing smokers with a cleaner form of nicotine is and should continue to be a critical goal, we still do not know if these devices help smokers quit smoking, and we know very little about the long-term effects of these devices. What we do know is that youth, lots of youth, are using these devices. In fact, the FDA commissioner recently used the term epidemic to describe e-cigarette use in the US. While trying to solve one huge public health problem, cigarette smoking, we may have created another colossal one. Our lack of vigilance in the earlier years around cigarette smoking led to a cigarette epidemic and many, many cigarette-related diseases. We do not want to repeat the same mistakes with e-cigarettes. So, now is the time for action, for regulations that address the appeal and access of these devices to youth. Do smokers really need 15,000 kid-friendly flavors to quit smoking? Do they need so many different kinds of devices? Is it a good idea to have devices which are so easy to hide and so easy to use? We recently heard that the FDA plans to introduce stricter regulations on sales of these devices that contain e-liquid flavors in retail locations like convenience stores and gas stations, and also introduce stricter regulations on sales of devices to minors over the internet. Is this going to be sufficient to change this rapid increase in youth uptake? We need to ask and answer such critical questions. Now is also the time for a serious public education campaign. Teens and their parents need to know that while e-cigarettes may contain less toxins than cigarettes, they are certainly not benign. Exposure of their bodies to the chemicals produced by these devices could be changing them in ways they may not like and setting them up for future unknown toxicities and health problems. You know, when I said earlier that e-cigarettes were a perfect fit for the smartphone generation, I was not kidding. We live in a technology-crazed world where the latest device and technology gets a lot of attention just because it is technology and because it is the latest thing. More and more over the next few years and for the rest of our lives, We are going to see technologies coming into the marketplace that may not raise any health flags at first, simply because they don't look unhealthy or they are not a medical device. For example, we could see devices that may make it easier to go longer without sleep, or help us lose weight, a personal goal of mine, or achieve any number of other goals that we as consumers are very, very interested in. But many of these devices may come with unacceptable risks to our own health. So if we want to protect our health and the health of our children, perhaps we should get out of the habit of automatically celebrating such new technology and get into the habit of looking at them with a critical eye, perhaps even through a medical lens. Because you know something, our health, the health of our children, and our future generations is far too valuable to let it go up in smoke or even an aerosol. Thank you.
Welcome back, and that was a TED Talk from Suchitra Krishnan Sareen, a behavioral scientist.
Thank you, Manisha. That was a really interesting TED Talk. For those of you just tuning in, you're listening to A Sound Constitution on CHLY 101.7 FM. This episode, we are clearing the air on vaping. Up next, Kristen is going to tell us a little bit about the research that is out there right now. Kristen, tell us about some of the research out there.
Thank you, Lindsay. So this is Kristen here, and welcome, listeners. So with vaping only being introduced recently, research is just starting to come out on the effects it can have on your health. So here we have looked through a few of them, and we'll talk about them in this segment. One of the recent studies we found was done in Sweden, and it was regarding the acute effects that e-cigarettes had on the blood vessels in your body and lungs there. The study's main focus was looking into the effects of nicotine itself and its potential harm to the body. The study noted that after inhaling the vapor with nicotine, there was a noted stiffness in the arterial walls, a type of blood vessels in your body, and it generally typically moves blood away from the heart. So these vessels did return back to their normal state after about 30 minutes or so, but still noted that with chronic use that the stiffness can be maintained. So what did this mean? This is just a preliminary study, but it does start to show a possible link to the damage nicotine can cause on the body, which isn't well known due to previous studies being done on its tobacco form and generally a lot of the other harmful effects that tobacco has on the body there. This study can help provide a starting point for further research into nicotine's effect and the possible linkage to various blood vessel diseases such as atherosclerosis, which is when plaques start to form in many of the arteries there. So it's just something to keep in mind and start to kind of look forward to future studies. The next prominent study that we'll be talking about in the segment here has been referenced in the news recently, and it's from researchers at the Baylor College of Medicine in Texas. In this, researchers look at the solvents, the liquid component in which the nicotine and flavoring is dissolved into, and the effects it has regarding the innate lung immunity, which means the ability of the lungs to help fight off invaders. In this study, the researchers found that the solvents disrupted the composition of the surfactant, which needs a specific composition to help with oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange between the air you breathe and what's in your blood. We're just going to quickly pull you away from the research here, there, listeners, and do a quick little body tidbit in section that you may didn't know. So, what is surfactant and why do you need it in our lungs? Well, surfactant is produced by the cells in the alveoli, which are the little bubbles at the very, very ends of your lungs there after the air you breathe comes in. And it is needed to help keep them inflated and not completely deflate when you breathe in and out. So try to think of this like a balloon, and how it is hard to start to inflate it when it's kind of fresh out of the bag there. You need a lot of air pressure to start to blow it up initially. However, once you have some air in it, if you continue to blow up the balloon from there, it's pretty easy, and you don't have to take much pressure or effort on your part. The surfactant is kind of like that. It helps keep your alveoli in an inflated state so that's easier for the air to flow into and out of it and oxygenate your blood. And now back to the study there. So we have the surfactant that is needed to be kept in a certain composition, and there are immune cells in your lung called macrophages to help keep it that way. This study showed that the vaporized solvents, and in this study it studied propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin, interrupted those immune cells from performing their function and led to further disruption of the surfactant composition. In this study, this disruption led to a delayed immune response. Again, this was the first study of its kind, and further research is needed to determine the extent of how much the innate immunity of your lungs is affected by these solvents. So lastly on this segment here, listeners, we're going to talk about some of the numbers. And there have been a lot of numbers thrown out in the news lately regarding the noted deaths and hospitalizations related to e-cigarettes and vaping. What we have found here at Sound Constitution in our research that a lot of those have been related to the inclusion of marijuana or THC oil to the e-cigarette liquid and vaping. In a recent update of October 3rd, 2019, the CDC, or Center for Disease Control, is currently investigating the causes of these hospitalizations in the United States, which is now up to 1,080 lung injury cases. They are still currently investigating, as is the medical community at large, the exact chemical or multiple chemicals that cause these injuries. You can find more information on their website of www.cdc.gov and look under the tobacco section there. Now, you may be wondering how to sift through all the information and statistics out there when you come up with all this information out on social media and on the news out there. We have a quick TED Talk from Mona Chalabi, a data journalist, on 3 simple ways to help spot bad statistics and arm yourself in determining if a source is credible or not.
Now, I'm going to be talking about statistics today. If that makes you immediately feel a little bit wary, that's okay. That doesn't make you some kind of crazy conspiracy theorist. It makes you skeptical. And when it comes to numbers, especially now, you should be skeptical. But you should also be able to tell which numbers are reliable and which ones aren't. So today I want to try to give you some tools to be able to do that. But before I do, I just want to clarify which numbers I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about claims like 9 out of 10 women would recommend this anti-aging cream. I think a lot of us have always rolled our eyes at numbers like that. What's different now is that people are questioning statistics like the US unemployment rate is 5%. What makes this claim different is that it doesn't come from a private company, it comes from the government. And actually now, about 4 out of 10 Americans distrust the economic data that gets reported by government. Now, I don't need to tell anyone here that there are a lot of dividing lines in our society right now. And a lot of them start to make sense once you understand people's relationships with these government numbers. See, on the one hand, there are those who say that these statistics are crucial, that we need them to make sense of society as a whole in order to move beyond emotional anecdotes and measure progress in this objective way. And then there are the others who say that these statistics are elitist, maybe even rigged. They don't make sense and they don't really reflect what's happening in people's everyday lives. Now, it kind of feels like that second group is winning the argument right now. We're living in a world of alternative facts where people don't find statistics this kind of common ground, this starting point for debate. This is a problem. There are actually moves in the US right now to get rid of some government statistics altogether. Right now, there's a bill in Congress about measuring racial inequality. The draft law says that government money should not be used to collect data on racial segregation. This is a total disaster. If we don't have this data, how can we observe discrimination, let alone fix it? In other words, how can a government create fair policies if they can't measure current levels of unfairness? And this isn't just about discrimination, it's everything. Think about how can we legislate on healthcare if we don't have good data on health or poverty? How can we have a public debate about immigration if we can't all at least agree on how many people are entering and leaving the country? Statistics come from the state, that's why they got their name. And the point was to better measure the population in order to better serve it. So we need these government numbers, but we also have to move beyond either blindly accepting or blindly rejecting them. We need to learn the skills to be able to spot bad statistics. Now, I started to learn some of these when I was working in a statistical department that's part of the United Nations. And our job was to find out how many Iraqis had been forced from their homes as a result of the war and what they needed. It was really important work, but it was also incredibly difficult. Every single day, we were making decisions that affected the accuracy of our numbers. Decisions like which parts of the country we should go to, who we should speak to, which questions we should ask. And I started to feel really disillusioned with our work because we thought we were doing a really good job. But the one group of people who could really tell us were the Iraqis, and they rarely got a chance to find our analysis, let alone question it. So I started to feel really determined that the one way to make numbers more accurate is to have as many people as possible be able to question them. So I became a data journalist, and my job is finding these data sets and kind of sharing them with the public. And anyone can do this. You don't have to be a geek or a nerd. You can ignore those words. They're used by people who are trying to say they're smart while pretending they're humble. Absolutely anyone can do this. So I want to give you guys 3 questions that will help you be able to spot some bad statistics. So question number 1 is, can you see uncertainty? Now, one of the things that's really changed people's relationship with numbers, and in fact, even their trust in the media, has been the use of political polls based on national elections in the UK, Italy, Israel, and of course, the most recent US presidential election. Using polls to predict electoral outcomes is about as accurate as using the moon to predict hospital admissions. There are a lot of reasons why polling has become so inaccurate. Our societies have become really diverse, which makes it very difficult for pollsters to get a really nice representative sample of the population for their polls. People are really reluctant to answer their phones to pollsters, and also, shockingly enough, people might lie. But you wouldn't necessarily know that to look at the media. For one thing, the probability of a Hillary Clinton win was communicated with decimal places. We don't use decimal places to describe the temperature. How on earth can predicting the behaviour of 230 million voters in this country be that precise? And then there were those sleek charts. See, a lot of data visualizations will overstate certainty, and it works. These charts can numb our brains to criticism. When you hear a statistic, you might feel skeptical. As soon as it's buried in a chart, it feels like some kind of objective science, and it's not. So I was trying to find ways to better communicate this to people, to show people the uncertainty in our numbers. So, for example, instead of finding out the probability of getting the flu in any given month, you can see the rough distribution of flu season. But it's also more responsible data visualization, because if you were to show the exact probabilities, maybe that would encourage people to get their flu jabs at the wrong time. Now, the point of these shaky lines is so that people remember these imprecisions, but also that they don't necessarily walk away with a specific number, but they can remember important facts. Facts like injustice and inequality leave a huge mark on our lives. Facts like Black Americans and Native Americans have shorter life expectancies than those of other races, and that isn't changing anytime soon. Facts like prisoners in the US can be kept in solitary confinement cells that are smaller than the size of an average parking space. The second question that you guys should be asking yourselves to spot bad numbers is, can I see myself in the data? Now, this question is also about averages in a way, because part of the reason why people are so frustrated with these national statistics is they don't really tell the story of who's winning and who's losing from national policy. It's easy to understand why people are frustrated with these global averages when they don't match up with their personal experiences. So I really wanted to show people the way that data relates to their everyday lives. So I started this advice column called Dear Mona, where people would write to me with questions and concerns, and I would try to answer them with data. People really ask me anything, questions like, is it normal to sleep in a separate bed to my wife? Do people regret their tattoos? What does it mean to die of natural causes? And all of these questions are great because they really make you think about ways to find and communicate these numbers. If someone asks you how much pee is a lot of pee, which is a question that I got asked, you really want to make sure that the visualization makes sense to as many people as possible. Now, these numbers aren't unavailable. Sometimes they're just buried in the appendix of an academic study. And they're certainly not inscrutable. If you really wanted to test these numbers on urination volume, you could grab a bottle and try it out for yourself. The point of this isn't necessarily that every single data set has to relate specifically to you. I'm interested in how many women were issued fines in France for wearing the face veil or the niqab, even if I don't live in France or wear the face veil. See, the point of asking where you fit in is to get as much context as possible. It's about zooming out from one data point, like the unemployment rate is 5%, and seeing how it changes over time, or seeing how it changes by educational status. This is why your parents always wanted you to go to college. Or seeing how it varies by gender. Nowadays, male unemployment rate is higher than the female unemployment rate. Up until the early 80s, it was the other way around. See, this is the story of one of the biggest changes that's happened in American society, and it's all there in that chart once you look beyond the averages. The axes are everything. Once you change the scale, you can change the story. Okay, so the third and final question that I want you guys to think about when you're looking at statistics is, how was the data collected? So far, I've only talked about the way that data is communicated, but the way it's collected matters just as much. And I know this is tough because methodologies can be opaque and actually kind of boring, but there are still some simple steps you can take to check this. So I'll use one last example here. One poll found that 41% of Muslims in this country support jihad, which is obviously pretty scary, and it was reported everywhere in 2015. Now, when I want to check a number like that, I'll start off by finding the original questionnaire. And it turns out that journalists who reported on that statistic ignored a question lower down on the survey that asked respondents how they defined jihad. And most of them defined it as, quote, Muslims' personal, peaceful struggle to be more religious. Only 16% defined it as violent holy war against unbelievers. Now, this is the really important point. Based on those numbers, it's totally possible that no one in the survey who defined it as violent holy war also said they support it. Those two groups might not overlap at all. It's also worth asking how the survey was carried out. This was something called an opt-in poll, which means that anyone could have found it on the internet and completed it. There's no way of knowing if those people really even identified as Muslim. And finally, there were 600 respondents in that poll. There are roughly 3 million Muslims in this country, according to Pew Research Center. That means the poll spoke to roughly 1 in every 5,000 Muslims in this country. Now, this is one of the reasons why government statistics are often better than private statistics. A poll might speak to a couple hundred people, maybe 1,000, or if you're L'Oreal trying to sell your skincare products in 2005, then you spoke to 48 women to claim that they work. See, private companies don't have a huge interest in getting the numbers right. They just need the right numbers. Government statisticians aren't like that. In theory, at least, they're totally impartial, not least because most of them do their jobs regardless of who's in power. They're civil servants. And to do their jobs properly, they don't just speak to a couple hundred people. Those unemployment numbers that I keep on referencing come from the Bureau of Labour Statistics. And to make their estimates, they speak to over 140,000 businesses in this country. Now, I get it, it's frustrating. If you want to test a statistic that comes from a private company, you can just buy the face cream for you and a bunch of friends, test it out, and if it doesn't work, you can say their numbers were wrong. But how do you question government statistics? Well, you just keep on checking everything. Find out how they collected the numbers. Find out if you're seeing everything on the chart that you need to see. But don't give up on the numbers altogether, because if you do, we'll be making public policy decisions in the dark, using nothing but private interests to guide us. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome back. And if you're just tuning in now, that was a quick TED Talk from Mona Chalabi, a data journalist, on 3 simple ways to help arm yourself against bad statistics. So regarding all this information, who do you trust around newest research and news? Well, credible news agencies that link their stories to the study they're reporting on is one way to make sure it's credible. Also, nonprofit agencies such as the Heart and Stroke Foundation and the BC Lung Association help in that they gather and synthesize all the latest studies out there in easy-to-read and helpful formats. Lastly, there are various resources out in the community and government websites that you can turn to for reliable information. And up next, Lindsay will be speaking to you on those resources there. And just as a side note, all studies discussed in this section will be posted on our Facebook page for you to have a look at. This is A Sound Constitutions, clearing the air on vaping on CHLY 101.7 FM. Thank you for listening.
So what does the law say about youth and vaping? The most recent Canadian Tobacco, Alcohol and Drugs Survey, which was released at the end of October, shows that the use of vaping products by youth in Canada is steady and well below levels being reported in the United States. But this is a rapidly evolving market with new products regularly being introduced into Canada, and so Health Canada is watching carefully. Canada has already established a strong regulatory framework for vaping products, with a focus on preventing uptake by youth and non-smokers. On May 23, 2018, Canada passed into law the new Tobacco and Vaping Products Act, also known as TVPA. The Act creates a national minimum age of access for vaping products of 18 years. It also includes significant restrictions on the promotion of vaping products, such as bans on advertising that appeals to youth, lifestyle advertising, sponsorship promotion, and giveaways of vaping products. Additional restrictions under the TVPA also include bans on the sale and promotion of vaping products that make the product appealing to youth, such as interesting shapes or sounds, the promotion of certain flavors like candy, desserts, or soft drinks that may be appealing to youth as well, and product promotion by testimonials or endorsements. In summary, the Tobacco and Vaping Products Act prohibits vaping products to be sold or given to anyone under the age of 18. Here in BC, that has increased to the age of 19. HealthLinkBC.ca expands on that, saying, in BC, vapor products are regulated in the same way as tobacco products. Tobacco and vapor products cannot be sold to minors or promoted publicly. It cannot be used in public buildings and workplaces, near doorways or air intakes of public buildings, or on school property. For more information on the current vaping legislation in BC, visit the Government of British Columbia requirements under the Tobacco and Vapor Products Control Act and Regulation. In BC, the legal age to buy vaping products is 19 years of age. So what does all this information mean? BC health agencies, including HealthLink BC, say that quitting smoking using e-cigarettes does lower your intake of chemicals, while vaping products and e-cigarettes deliver nicotine in a less harmful way than smoking cigarettes. They are not harmless. These products may reduce health risks for smokers who can't or don't want to quit using nicotine, but only if the user switches completely. The Government of Canada on canada.ca gives some points to consider before picking up that vape pen. The first point is vaping can deliver nicotine to your body, causing you to crave it more and more, leading to addiction and physical dependence. In teens, vaping nicotine can also alter brain development. The second point, vaping can cause lung damage. Vaping can expose you to harmful chemicals like formaldehyde and acrolein, and metals and contaminants like nickel, tin, and aluminum. You don't want any of these in your lungs. According to Health Canada, vaping products produce an aerosol that may contain dozens of chemicals. The ingredients typically found in vaping liquids are also found in the aerosol. They include glycerol, flavors, propylene glycol, and nicotine. And some of these even include more nicotine than the conventional cigarette. The long-term health impacts of vaping are unknown. Some of the chemicals found in vaping liquid, like vegetable, glycerin, and propylene glycol, are safe for use in products like cosmetics and sweeteners, but the long-term safety of inhaling these substances is unknown and continues to be assessed. So why risk it? You can get the facts and know the risks associated with vaping through 2 interactive activities that they have online. Consider the consequences.ca/online-activities. So, Benisha, what are some of the recommendations that the CDC is suggesting?
Some of CDC's recommendations are based on the symptoms of lung injury that is reported by some patients in the outbreak. And those symptoms first are cough, shortness of breath, chest pain, nausea, vomiting, or diarrhea. And some patients have reported that their symptoms have developed over a few days, while others have reported that their symptoms developed over several weeks. A lung infection does not appear to be causing the symptoms. You should consider refraining from e-cigarettes or vaping products, particularly those containing THC as per CDC recommendation, and also not buy these products off the street and not modify or add any substances to these products that are not intended by the manufacturer. See a healthcare provider right away if you have symptoms like those reported in this outbreak. If you're an adult who used e-cigarettes containing nicotine to quit cigarette smoking, do not return to smoking cigarettes. Women who are pregnant should not use e-cigarettes or vaping products. THC use has been associated with a wide range of health effects, particularly with prolonged heavy use. The best way to avoid potentially harmful effects is to not use THC, including through e-cigarette or vaping products. And those recommendations are by CDC. Thank you.
So if you're thinking about quitting smoking or quitting vaping, there are a few resources here in BC that you can access. There is Quit Now. Quit Now provides excellent options for people who are looking to quit smoking or vaping, and also resources for friends and families of those who smoke. The website has lots of great tips, information, and services, which include a quit plan tool, text support. Text quit now to 654-321. There's also phone support. You can call toll free at 1-877-455-2233. And there's also an online chat, so you can check that out at www.quitnow.ca. So BC also has a smoking cessation program. It's offered to all British Columbians through nicotine replacement products at no cost and smoking cessation prescription drugs as benefits under pharmacare. This program is open to BC residents who smoke or use other tobacco products such as vaping and wish to quit. So for more information, visit the website. We're going to link that in our Facebook page. It is under the gov.bc.ca website. So another program is Prescription for Health. BC family physicians can help British Columbians who are at risk get on the road to a healthier lifestyle. For more information, visit www.healthyfamiliesbc.ca. This is Lindsay with a Sound Constitution on CHLY 101.7 FM. We're clearing the air on vaping. So I'm here with Karen Alden, who's a VIU employee. So Karen, tell us a little bit about your role in the community or here at VIU.
So I've been working at VIU for about 12, 13 years, and I work in athletics and recreation, and my role is to coordinate the fitness and the health and wellness programs here at VIU. So my title is Fitness and Lifestyles. I also do contract work for the BC Lung Association for a program called Quit Now, which is BC's main smoking cessation program. So I bring a lot of the Quit Now resources and skill sets that I have with BC Lung Association and incorporate them into my VIU work because it all pairs very nicely with the health and wellness angle. So yeah, it works together.
Absolutely, it works very well. So can you tell us a little bit about vaping or e-cigarettes versus the conventional cigarettes? Is one better than the other, or is it best to just not do either?
So there's a ton of information happening right now. I like to cover it completely and just say vapor products. That covers all of the different brands, the different kinds, the different styles of use with electronic cigarettes. So vapor products, I'll just use that terminology. Right now in the United States, there's been, the last count was 26 deaths that were confirmed related to vaping. There's also been over 1,300 lung injury, a lung illness, respiratory illnesses that have occurred in 49 out of 50 states. So there's a public health crisis happening in the United States right now, and Health Canada is watching very closely to watch what the United States is doing, but also to have some prevention mechanisms in place so Canada can be prepared, because most likely what happens in the States will certainly trickle into Canada. Mm-hmm. Vapor products were legalized in 2018, May of 2018. So what that means is that all of the stores, all of the brands that were created prior to that did not have any safety standards. There was no bar that was set to establish any type of safety. There was no ingredient monitoring. There was no guidelines, no regulations in place until May of 2018. So stores right now are legally now allowed to sell vapor products. Mm-hmm. Actually, in May of 2018, it was the nicotine component that came legal in the vapor products.
That's still very recent.
Yes, it's very recent, but we're not far from that. And right now there is a huge, as I mentioned, a huge vaping crisis. So is it safer than smoking cigarettes? Let's compare. Health Canada's position in May 2018 when they legalized the nicotine component in vapor products was that if you smoke, vapor products are less harmful for you.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't smoke, you will be exposed to harmful toxins and chemicals,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I'll be very interested to know if Health Canada ever changes their positioning on that based on what's currently happening like right now in the US. So if we compare the two, smoking a tobacco cigarette, you have to light it. It's combustible.
Mm-hmm.
So what that means is that it once a cigarette is lit, it forms thousands of extra chemicals, and there's just endless carcinogens in there, cancer-causing carcinogens in that smoke. Mm-hmm. There's carbon monoxide, so that is only formed when something is burning. So there's all of those pieces that you don't get with a vapor product, because a vapor product you don't light. It's heated. What happens is the e-juice, what they call the e-juice, is heated. So a battery heats up the e-juice and it forms an aerosol. It's actually not a vapor, it's an aerosol that's inhaled by the user, and then and that's what is created, but there's no carbon monoxide. So you do have that difference in the secondhand component, whether it's secondhand smoke or secondhand aerosol. So there's far less in a vapor product.
Right.
But does that mean that it's harmless? No. There's still particulate matter. It has been identified in studies, and this is confirmed, that there's particulate matter in aerosol from vapor products. They've identified metals, nickel, lead, tin, cadmium, a whole bunch of things. There's volatile organic compounds. There's nicotine, most likely, because that's mostly what vapor product. There are the flavorings. There's chemicals. When the e-juice is heated, it actually creates new chemicals. So new chemicals become developed. For example, formaldehyde is one of the things in the aerosol that has been identified.
So it just forms new bonds?
Yes, when there is a heating of this juice, there's actually some creation and new chemicals are developed. And formaldehyde has been one of them, for example, that's been identified. There's a chemical Diacetyl. And this has been associated with lung illness, and irreversible lung illness. People, it's been phrased popcorn lung. The history behind that was there was in a microwave popcorn facility, a lot of the workers were getting sick. They were inhaling a chemical called Diacetyl, which actually adds the flavor to butter popcorn.
Oh, okay.
So now that because they were inhaling it, they were starting to all form these scars in their lungs and have all of these breathing issues, which was irreversible. So this Diacetyl has also been added into some vapor products. So it's not saying it's causing popcorn lung, but and they of course call it popcorn lung because it started in a popcorn factory, but they're not saying it causes, but there is a link. So there's a lot of things in the aerosol from a vapor product, but there's a lot of things in a traditional tobacco cigarette as well. So what the Center of Disease Control in the United States and what Health Canada is saying is really they're telling people not to vape at all right now.
Yeah.
That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
They're saying just don't, if you're trying to get off cigarettes, don't go to vaping because of what's happening right now. That's what they're saying. So vapor products are not looking so good right now.
So the patch or the gum is safer than the vapor products then?
So every BC resident is eligible to have free nicotine replacement therapy, NRT for short. And you get your choice of 4 things from any pharmacy. You can walk into any pharmacy and walk out with one of 4 things for free every year for 3 months. Okay. That can be the nicotine patch, gum, lozenge, or inhaler.
Okay.
So if someone who's trying to quit smoking or quit a vapor product with nicotine goes into a pharmacy, talks to their pharmacist, say, hey, I'm really interested in that inhaler, you can walk out with your first month that day.
So that includes anyone trying to quit any nicotine product, not just the conventional cigarette.
That's my understanding, yes. Yeah, it's to reduce, the way nicotine replacement therapy works is to gradually reduce the amount of nicotine. Mm-hmm. So people go in there addicted to nicotine gum sometimes, right? They'll try the gum to get off the cigarettes, and then sometimes they end up addicted to the gum. So you are replacing one nicotine with another. However, it's a clean form of nicotine. So if you're smoking, but then you go to the patch or the gum or the lozenge, for example, you're not going to get those thousands of chemicals that are created when you burn it, a cigarette or smoke a cigarette. So it's that cleaner form of nicotine. But those are free. People can go into the pharmacy and have 3 months for free. And this is actually the best time of year to do it.
Oh, good.
Because if it's 3 months per year, October, November, December, there's your 3 months. Once January comes, you get a brand new 3 months. So you get coverage for 6 months in total.
Oh, that's good to know.
This is the perfect time of year if you're thinking about quitting vaping or smoking. The perfect time of year to walk into a pharmacy.
Oh, great. Is there any other resources, either in Nanaimo or on campus here at VIU, that you'd like everybody to hear about?
So if anybody's thinking about quitting smoking and wants to have more of a conversation, they're more than welcome to contact me, karen.alden@viu.ca. I'm more than happy to have that conversation with them. There are material resources in Building 200, and I also have some material resources here at the gym. You can go access the quitnow.ca website. There's a host of interactive pieces there. You can call the Quit Now toll-free number. I can give people all that information if they want to give me a shout. And then there's you can talk to a quit coach. You can develop a quit plan. You can have phone support, email support. You can do contests to try to quit smoking for 24 hours and win $250. There's a lot of support available for people who want to quit smoking.
That's great. So you don't have to do it alone.
Nope, you don't have to do it alone. And evidence actually states that if you did it with a partner, then you actually increase your chances of a successful quit attempt.
Okay, thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you.
Okay, bye. That was Karen from VIU. That's all we have for today here on A Sound Constitution on CHLY 101.7 FM. That was Clearing the Air on Vaping.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. We encourage you to reach out to your healthcare provider for more information. As always, check out our Facebook page for resources for today's show. Every episode is uploaded to our YouTube channel if you'd like to hear it again.
If there are any topics you'd like to hear us discuss, let us know by email at asoundconstitution@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to A Sound Constitution on CHLY 101.7 FM.